Hey everybody, welcome to On Hand Art. Today is about pivoting. It originally was about repairing this piece of garden sculpture that I had made 3 years ago or so. It had been in many windstorms and those plates came off, so I am going to crush them up and melt them. They're made out of bismuth. Bismuth metal is a brittle metal, so it's just easy to kind of work with your hands. It melts around the same temperature as tin, so about 500 degrees Fahrenheit. So consider working with it like working with hot oil. I did actually put a windscreen on this. When I was doing this outside for my live stream, it was a little too windy and it was blowing the flame down and it wasn't hot enough to fully melt the bismuth. I decided to redo the whole thing and remake it. And so we're going to just tear off all these discs of bismuth and make sure that the adhesive I'd used, which was construction adhesive on the back, is all gone. And then I'm making little stems for what you'll see later are kind of droplets, although they're rather large, but they're going to be droplets, kind of huge leaves for this, for what originally was going to be another garden sculpture. And then here's me pouring it, and you can kind of see that it just wasn't melting. This point, though, in the live stream, I got really frustrated. It had been about an hour and a half. Things were not working out. It was getting frustrating, so I am pivoting really hard. I decided to put it away for a night, and when I came back that morning, I had a completely different idea. This was going to go from being an outdoor sculpture to an indoor piece of art, and I was going to reuse some artwork that I had kind of laying around for a couple of years and that I wasn't happy with. So it was a perfect opportunity to do that. So we're moving into the garage, and I made new molds that are smaller in shape and size and not quite as heavy as the previous ones I was doing in the live stream. And then once I had made enough of those, I'm going to take a soldering iron on one of its highest settings, and I'm just going to melt down and cut the old pieces that were much larger down to the new smaller size. And that's what you're seeing here. And it's really just about letting the soldering iron do the work, let the heat do the work. And where something heat resistant to hold the piece, the bismuth likes to heat up a lot faster than it will start melting. So it gets pretty hot and it's hard to hold. So anyway, I'm doing this on paper. As you can see, it's totally safe. Just, watch yourself. You can also use a wood burning kit. I think they get hot enough. Either way, once I had enough of the new pieces and their little stems are on, I'm going to put those aside for now. And we're going to move on to the old artwork that is another pivot in this whole process. This is a piece that I had done a couple years ago, and at the time I was kind of happy with it. I thought it was cute, kind of fun, and I looked at it literally the next day of having it, and I just didn't like it. It wasn't what I wanted, and so I kind of let it sit around for a couple years. Like I said, the actual board that it's on is actually a tabletop that I had made. This is just a practice piece that I had made many years ago for another table, yet another pivot. And so this piece is just all about pivoting and just letting go of what you're doing and trying something new and not making things so precious or being held to one direction so hard that you miss out on new opportunities. Once I got the board cleaned up, I just painted it with a mix of the last of my 2 small tubes of black and then a whole bunch of dark purple, kind of a royal purple color. And that gives it sort of a purpley tint. I don't want to say that you can see it. You can tell that it's kind of a purple tint to it in a bright light. Otherwise, it's a nice kind of a medium dark black, and it really hides all of the flaws and things that are now in this board after scraping off all the old artwork. And I am out of copper wire, so it is time to go and harvest some. This is the winding of a motor. So an electric motor has electric magnet in it, which is what you're seeing here. I won't get into the details. Anyway, I won't get into the technicals. The point is that you can just start pulling the wire out. This is 18 gauge magnet wire, so it is an electromagnet, and this is 18 gauge magnet wire. It doesn't necessarily come out as easy as I'm showing here. There's a lot of finagling and frustration that I kind of saved you from watching me go through. Here's a tiny, tiny bit of it. But either way, once I got it out and I started winding it on the old spool. Oh, by the way, I'm going to keep that piece and I'll use it for something else later. Now we can measure how long we want the tree to be, and we can start bundling it up. So I used most of that entire roll, and then it's just a matter of twisting the trunk of the tree with my incredible strength. Okay, copper wire is relatively soft. It wasn't really that big a deal. But a lot of this is also about leverage. So you just kind of give yourself a little length, and then you can start twisting, and it becomes much easier when you have that little bit of length. And then once I got the trunk as long as I wanted it, I could break it out and break all the wires out into branches. And using an electric drill, just going nice and slow, made this whole process so much easier. Anyway, while I was away from the painting, I got the idea to put a harvest moon behind this tree. Just a nice, bright, cheerful, but autumn harvest moon. And I felt like that was a little bit more magical. And I'm painting into the center just so I can keep a nice crisp edge on that disc. And then later I came back and I kind of gave it a swirl and gave it some more random pattern, so when it dried, it has a nice texture to it. And now we can start adding our droplets onto the tree. And I'll give you a better angle in a minute, but the idea really is just to loosen up the coil, slide that stem into the coil, and then follow the same direction the coil is going, and make it nice and tight so that those don't slide or move, and they just kind of hold in forever. This is another point where once I got those all in, I moved the tree aside because I had another idea, which is to use all the little crumbles from making these pieces for the background. So as I said before, bismuth is really brittle, and when we made the droplets in the molds, there were a lot of little edge pieces that just crumbled right off. So we're going to put a nice heavy coat of lacquer on the painting. This is going to be a matte lacquer. And then just kind of sprinkle all of these on. I did come back and move things around and make sure that everything was nice and even or looked the way I wanted it to. And I'm not sure if this part was really necessary, but I did, when the lacquer was mostly dry, I covered the whole thing in baking parchment, and then I put a bunch of weight on it to try and press those crumbles into not only the black paint surface, but also just to kind of hold them in place in the lacquer. And then for the final assembly, I'm just drilling in to strategic points where I don't think that the viewer will be able to see very well, which will be behind the trunk and the branches. And then I'm using some of my leftover wire to, again, put the wire into the twist of the trunk and the branches, and then put it through those holes, and then twist it on the back nice and snugly. It's not super, super tight, but it's enough that basically it's going to be held there forever. And now that it's done, I can show you the finished piece. And I really hope you enjoyed this video, but I also want to remind you that you are creative. Your artwork is enough. And go out there and experiment and play and go beyond what you've learned or you do already and see what you can do. Anyway, I will see you in the next video, and bye.